Hi everyone, I'm Josh, and this is Josh Wright Piano TV. Thanks so much for joining me today. I want to share a few tips about tremolo work, or tremoli, if you're talking about multiple tremolos. We're going to hit that Beethoven Pathetique to start with because I just picked up a new tip from my friend Robert Dorso. I actually recorded this video a few days ago, and then I saw him yesterday, and he gave me this tip. I was like, I got to re-record because that's a cool tip. And then I wanted to talk about chordal tremoli, or tremolos. I believe that's the Italian plural for tremolo, as tremoli, as seen in pieces that two students recently brought me. The Waldstein Opus 53 Sonata by Beethoven. Let's see. That right there. So it's going to a chord. And then perhaps even a more complex one is the Ravel Jadot. So I taught a student recently, and I gave him a little image to think about. So these are three different tips that I'm going to share today. The first two encompass those two Beethoven sonatas very well. One thing that I was doing is I was keeping my fingers a little bit more straight on. And Dr. Dorso had said, you know, that causes the hand to twist a little bit. If you keep the fingers pointing in the same direction and then you allow your opposable thumb to be on the other note, and the whole Taubman approach, he's a master Taubman teacher, is to use the hand, arm, and arm, wrist, hand, all in harmony. You don't want to isolate them and try to do it with the fingers. He said, because I don't have that much trouble with octave tremolos because I have big hands, but he said if you relax those fingers down that way, that puts the hand in a more natural position than having them straight on. Now, this doesn't feel particularly bad in my hand, but I noticed when he said, okay, just turn your hand slightly, it really did make a difference. We were just talking about some basics of Taubman approach, but we got on the subject of tremoli somehow, and it was really helpful. So that's the first tip. If you're doing octave tremoli, go ahead and make sure that the hand is not twisted into a straight-on position and the thumb feels strained or these fingers feel strained. Allow those fingers to relax, and they'll probably be a bit more relaxed if you point down the keyboard a little bit like that. So big thanks to Dr. Dorso for that. The other thing that he had mentioned that I wanted to talk about that I had recorded before I talked to him was the fact that you want to use that doorknob turning rotation in your hand. And again, think of the concept that he really drilled home in the interview that we did a while back of the hand, wrist, and arm being all in harmony with each other, moving, and use that kind of doorknob turning rotation to help. But further than that, anytime you're doing a chordal tremolo, a temptation that you're going to have is to roll that tremolo. And we're going to see this in that example in the Ravel in just a moment. So how do we combat that? This is really good anytime you're leaping into chords that are going back and forth as well. I've done a video on this at some point. I don't remember where it is, but your hand tends to want to roll toward the top because it's a natural motion to rotate that way, but you have to be careful not to roll the actual chord. So how do we combat that? I like to play the outer notes, okay? So I would, if you're playing this, if you're playing those chordal tremoli, play the outer note. So if you're playing B and D right here, going to the thumb, just practice whatever fingering you're using. I personally use 4-2-1. I feel like I have a little better control than 5-3-1 so far as dynamics. So I'll just practice the 4 to the 1 and feeling that natural rotation. Anytime you have to travel greater distances too, you're going to have to use a little bit of lateral motion as well. Dr. Dorso and I had talked about that. You can even do that with octaves. It's a little bit of a lateral motion, but you could even think there, rather than just rotating over, if your hand is small, you may need a little bit of lateral motion, which you see in big jumps like La Campanella is an instance. I'm trying to think of other instances right off the top of my head. Maybe I'm not going to go into that example, actually. Okay, so that helps to think about the outer notes of a chordal tremolo. And let's get into that with this revel. Okay. As you notice, it looks pretty natural in the hand. It feels good. It doesn't feel tense, but the student I was teaching said, oh, I just feel really tense here. Again, he was using too much fingers, and then his hand got caught. He wasn't using that natural rotation. But again, the temptation might be to do something like that. So if you practice the outer notes first, that really helps. An image that I gave him is I said, think of like a miniature cone, like, maybe an inch off the keys, and think of rotating over that cone to allow yourself to get to that top note and to that bottom note. That really helped him. And immediately his hand loosened up because he was no longer caught down here with too low of a wrist. He was no longer caught just playing with the fingers. He was allowing that rotation to happen, and that image of the cone helped him to think, okay, I got to kind of rotate up and over in the hand, which is a very natural way of moving versus trying to do this in the fingers. The same thing can be said about my two personal nemesis places that I still am working on. I can do this passage in the Chopin double thirds etude fine with this fingering, like 4-2-5-1, or 3-2-5-1, or even 3-2-4-1. That one's a little weaker, but 3-1-5-2, which is what's written in a lot of the scores, it's because my hand tenses, and I know this, and I'm still working to get rid of it, and it's just fingers rather than allowing the natural rotation. This was a little breakthrough for me. It's still not perfect, but I thought, okay, because a lot of times your hand wants to do that. So I thought, okay, let me think of rotating from the bottom note to the top note, which is the opposite way that you would usually rotate in the middle. You'd think down to this one, but you're actually rotating to the upper note. So that seemed to help, and it certainly helps in tough spots like this. This is another personal nemesis, is this that nocturne. My hand always feels a little tight, which is so funny because this feels very natural and loose in my hand. But this example, I think it's just because it's a little more spread out. You've got to be even more diligent about that rotation, rotating from the bottom octave to the top octave. So I don't want to get too much into those because I'm not a master of those yet, but I certainly can vouch for that or those types of chordal tremoli. If you rotate to the outer notes, it certainly does help to loosen the hand. And then if you're doing chordal tremolo that has 2 notes on bottom, 2 notes on top, rotating over something can actually promote the proper rotation in your hand as well. Again, this is something that I feel fine with in certain instances and that I'm still working on in other cases. So take the advice for what it is. It's something I'm still working on. But that seems to have helped my students that I've been teaching those two pieces to a lot, and it seems to have helped me in some of those harder passages that I'm continuously working on myself. If any of you have any other questions, my email is josh@joshwrightpiano.com. I'm going to leave a few links for some additional resources in the description below. One of them is for a free webinar containing 10 of my favorite practice tips that I use each day in my teaching, as well as my own personal practice. I'm going to leave a link for 2 of my paid courses if you want to go even deeper than this channel covers into some repertoire and exercise videos. And then the final link is to my kit, which contains all of the gear that I use. A lot of you ask me what gear do I recommend for recording YouTube videos or recording myself just for personal performances, or what beginner books do you recommend, or what theory books do you recommend? And that's just a big collection of resources. You can check that out as well. Again, if any of you have any questions, my email is josh@joshwrightpiano.com. Have a great week. Good luck in your practice sessions.